Montclair. This is David Cummings, 4th Ward Councilor. Today I'm going to have a conversation with Dr. Jonathan Pons, the Montclair School Superintendent. Dr. Pons, thank you for doing this. Really appreciate it. I think this is all about getting people the opportunity to hear from you, get to know you a little bit, and more importantly, talk about where we are in education right now. But before we do that, I'd really like to give you an opportunity to tell Montclair about yourself, you know, your background.
I just want to say thank you for that, because your background determines who you are. And it's a saying that says a man that stands for nothing falls for anything. So my background starts, and I first want to say hello to my wife and my 3 boys. They're a big part of who I am. But I grew up in rural Alabama, and I saw all sides of the equation. Being an African-American man growing up in rural Alabama, you see a lot of different things. You have to learn to navigate a very difficult environment, especially when I was growing up. So, what I've learned is, what do you stand for? What do you believe in? So I believe that all people, particularly people that look like me and people who are disenfranchised, deserve an opportunity to be a part of this country and succeed. So I built my career around that. And when I figured out what I wanted to do with my life, I went full speed. I had a truck, and I was teaching. For me to go to graduate school, I had to sell my truck and get rid of that car payment. So I did that. Got a backpack and backpacked to work and took a train to work back and forth.
Now, where was this?
It was in Boston.
Okay.
It was cold sometimes, and when it rained, you had to get an umbrella. But I took a train, the B train, down Comm Ave, took it to Red Line, Ashmont Station in Dorchester. Did that for 3.5 years till I got my master's degree. And so I made that commitment, but I knew what I stood for and what I loved.
Now, how'd you get from rural Alabama? Now, rural Alabama, where in Alabama? There's Tuscaloosa, Birmingham, and Mobile.
So we grew up. I was born out of Tuskegee Hospital. Okay. It doesn't exist anymore, but I was born out of that hospital. Started my life in Waverly, Alabama. There are still not any stoplights in Waverly, Alabama. In fact, when you drive down 280, there's grass growing between the highway, the state highway. I grew up on a dirt road, and my father had an opportunity. He said, what am I going to do? He was working hard, 2 jobs, getting things figured out. And he said, I have a choice. Keep my kids in a school system that's not really serving them well. Because a lot of kids that I grew up, a lot of my cousins still in that area in Chambers County, would not finish school, get a job, pupwood and that kind of stuff. Or get my kids to a school system that can help them. So he decided to get us to Auburn. So when I was 10 years old, I moved to Auburn with my my family, everyone. So we went to the Auburn public school systems, and it gave us opportunity. There were things there. There's still things there. They gave us an opportunity to succeed. And my father always told me, they can take a ball from you, they can take a job from you, but they can't take your education from you. Sure. So I found my way, through the ups and downs of getting there. Lucky enough to get a scholarship to go to Queens University in Charlotte to play soccer. I was an average player at best, but I got an opportunity. From that, I got a job opportunity in Boston, Massachusetts. 25-year-old young man, with a green truck, gets on I-95, goes all the way to Massachusetts. My mother's going, what are you doing? I said, I'm going to take a chance. Went up there. I love basketball. Matt Poirier, still close friends today, said you'd be a great educator. Okay. He got me a job teaching at-risk students in Dorchester in the Woodrow Wilson Middle School. Wow. I loved the job. It was hard. I loved it. To continue, I had to get my master's degree. So I got rid of my truck, took the train back and forth, got my master's degree, and then went on and got my CAGs in education leadership, got 2 of those actually, and got a doctorate. But fell in love with it. But I knew when I was working with those students in Boston public schools, many who looked like me, I knew if they didn't have the opportunity, they weren't going to get an opportunity. And I met my wife there. So, Woodrow Wilson was tough. So I looked, I said, how is this young lady here in this school? And the principal at the time asked me to do an at-risk youth program on Saturdays. So I said, sure, I'd do it. And so I asked her, would she be willing to come with me work in this program? The kids loved her. Kids loved her. And she was, art teacher, so they did. And I asked for a date, went on a date, and I just told my mom, I said, you know what? I think she's the one.
Wow.
And so within a few weeks, I asked her to marry me. And 17 years later, we're still married.
God bless you, brother. That's awesome.
So
it was,
she just had that sparkle.
Yeah. I can relate to that transition. My second job out of college, I was working in North Carolina, a little small town, Lexington, and I got a job offer in Jackson, Mississippi. So when I called my mother and father and told them, hey, I'm moving to Jackson, Mississippi, like, what? You, where? And so, so think about it, northern kid down in Jackson, but loved it, learned a lot, saw a lot, and so I can relate to Auburn to Boston, Montclair, New Jersey, Jackson, Mississippi.
Yeah.
So
wow,
yeah, that's a transition.
That's a big transition.
That is. But I want to go. So I love the background, love it a lot. And I guess so. You mentioned you were a soccer player. I know you were a coach, been a principal, been a teacher, special education superintendent. Of all of those, what was your favorite role? Or if you had, if you had to say, I mean, you just said you loved, doing this after-school program. What was your favorite role?
I used to think being a principal was my favorite role because you were in the nexus. You were with kids. You were with families. You were doing everything until I became a superintendent. Mm. Because then you saw yourself, how can I make the biggest impact for every kid in this district? Because the decisions you make impact everyone across the district. So my first year as a superintendent was difficult. It was really difficult. I had to figure out, budgets, budgets. How do we move this money? How do we do this? How do we not go broke? How do we do these kind of things? But then how do I educate kids? And what I found out, if you know what you stand for, those decisions become easier. If you know who you care about, become easier. So when you focus on kids, what's right for kids, those decisions, not that hard to make. And so I saw that. I said, you know what? I can work with political leaders. I can work with principals, teachers, families, kids to make the bigger whole. So I fell in love with it. It's a hard job. It's hard because you're always on.
Right.
But the difference you can make for kids. I have a mentor, Dr. Aaron Graham. And I talked to Dr. Aaron Graham, and Dr. Graham says, Jonathan, what can you do to make the biggest impact for all children? And so Dr. Graham's amazing. African-American male, was county superintendent in Bergen for a long time.
Okay.
I call him when I have difficult decisions to make.
Right.
And I ask him, Dr. Graham, what would you do?
Well, that's what a mentor is for, man. And, to have that question. And I think if I were to, so one of the things I did, I sent out parents to send in questions that they had. And again, this is a conversation. And so to the parents, I want to make sure I'll ask the question without the commentary. So if you don't hear word for word what you sent in, it's because I took the liberty of saying, okay, what's the question? And so one of the questions that we received, it goes, and I think it's a very good question, particularly where we are currently. And it's a little bit of history with the marches and everything that have gone on, but the nexus of the question is, are there any programs you are currently concerned about in the Montclair Public School District?
That's a great question, because I've heard from families, stakeholders, students, administrators, and also district administrators about certain programs. And my response is that we're not going to make a Band-Aid solution. Taking away a program or changing something may not be the right answer. I asked the 5 whys. Why, to get to the root cause.
Right.
Once you get to the root cause, you can then make a programming decision around if it's a work or it doesn't work. But I am listening to families, stakeholders, because I've met with people who said, hey, this program's not working for us. This is not working for us. Then my response is, okay. Next response is why? Right. Why? Because a Band-Aid only puts the problem in a different bucket. It never solves it. Okay. So I want to solve it. I want to solve that problem. So when Montclair finally gets sick of me and move me on, the next individual will walk in with something that's working for our community and that's going well for our community. And so that's why I'm a big believer in asking those 5 questions why. because people bring up programs to me all the time, and they bring up valid points.
Right.
But I want to know why.
And you know, so one of the challenges in Montclair is you have 10 schools, excluding the high school, and each of them have their own programs. And so it's, you know, CI here, aesthetics here, you know, CSJ, CSI, you know, all these things. So, but I think one of the programs that a lot of people have talked about is restorative justice.
Yes.
And so I guess if I were to, you know, it seems to get a lot of support. Do you see it as something that you, Dr. Pons, sees as being valuable and viable for the district?
My goal is to make sure restorative justice is a part of our fabric in our district.
Okay.
I have to make sure of that. It is an amazing program, tested and tried throughout this country with great results.
Okay.
So I promised the board, I told my team and administrators and faculty, this is who we are. We're a restorative justice program. We're a restorative justice district, and my job is to make sure it happens.
Okay.
And it's part of my goals, my personal goals, and the district goals.
One of the things you've been very consistent on is you believe all children can learn. And I've had, when I was on the board, we had a superintendent who said all children can learn. I haven't had one superintendent not say that. And so, you know, another question from a parent is, what do you plan to do to make sure every child has an equal and fair education?
It's a great question. So, we've only been here for 6-7 weeks, but we're starting a coalition on reading around RTI, because what we've seen in the data is that students are not reading at or above grade level.
Can you, RTI, can you explain
Absolutely. It's that buzzword for response to intervention.
Right.
And what we're talking about is, like, if we see a child who's not reading or having difficulty reading, what are we doing to prevent that from putting that child in a category and then leaving them there? How are we guaranteeing that child has an opportunity to read and read successfully throughout? So Dr. Morgan, one of her calls is to, let's get this done. And I have my practices and I have my strategies, such as reciprocal teaching, Socratic seminar, buddy reading, all these techniques I've used as a principal before in these similar situations.
Right.
But I promised Dr. Morgan, she's the Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum Instruction, I'm going to give it to her. But I'm always asking those questions.
Is it hard for you to allow your team to work like that when you know you have something that you feel works, but you got to give Dr. Morgan, Ms. Kalisha, right?
Kalisha.
You have to give her I mean, I guess the question is, and this is not one of the parent questions, but how hard is it to allow someone to do something and you feel like you know how it should be done?
I'm such a hands-on person. It's really difficult. But leaders have to lead. And people like Dr. Morgan and Kalisha have the capacity to do so. I just ask a lot of questions. So when they're in meetings with me, I ask tons of questions. And yesterday was wonderful. She gets up and she goes, Dr. Pons, this is research. This is what we're going to do. I said, thank you, Kalisha. That's all I wanted to hear.
Right.
Stamp it, move forward.
Make a decision.
Make a decision to move forward.
Right.
And she is so talented. Also want to talk about our AP scores and exams. So we looked at our APs. We're like, what's going on with our APs? Why don't we have certain kids in our AP programs? Why the kids in there aren't performing well? And Kalisha, in her interview, explained what she did in Orange and South Orange. She blew me away. She talked about Saturday school and Saturday programs. She talked about how she moved the scores for our kids, getting all kids involved in moving the AP scores. I called Mr. Cooper up about 5 minutes later and said, she's the one. She's the one. And we had someone we thought was going to be that person, but she earned it.
Okay.
And so she has that capacity that I'm impressed about. But it's tough, because I'm always going to ask that question.
Right.
I'm always going to ask that next thing. What are you doing? What do you mean? Explain it to me. Be explicit. And then I took push, because I want to know, when we make a decision for our kids, is it the right decision? Because people always say all kids can learn. But what are you doing day in and day out to make that happen?
You mentioned AP, which has been a hot topic in Montclair for a while. And I've had personal experiences where my wife and I had to override teachers to get our kids in AP classes. And a lot of times it came down to the benefit of us believing in our child.
Absolutely.
And so when you mentioned, so what is your plan or thoughts around getting teachers to believe in that child. And when I say that, you know, if my son got a B in math or my daughter got a B in math, and I know they could have gotten an A, but they didn't, you know, that's why we were like, you can do better. And fortunately, we've been lucky. But I guess the question I have off of what you mentioned was, is that something that you feel you have to do to get teachers to look into identifying that kid who's not a high A class, A student, but in the right environment with the right support can be an AP student?
Yes. Yes, and Dr. Morgan has done it before in different districts.
Okay.
And she talked about looking at transcripts, talking to parents, calling parents up, talking about PSAT exams, and saying this child has potential. This child needs to work a little bit harder. Let's talk to the parent. How can we get the parent involved? But yes, and one of the things that leads me to the high school principal, that's the most important, one of the most important decisions I'll ever make in my career in Montclair is the high school principal.
Yeah, I'm going to get to that later, because that, I mean, so in Montclair, there's the mayor, the superintendent, the football coach, and then the high school principal. So that is I don't envy you, but I think a lot of people, based on the way you've come into the district, trust and feel like, you know, whatever decision you make, I personally say, you know, I think it'll be one that'll be, well, it'll be controversial, but I think it's one that it's good to have you being able to make it, you know, because you're the superintendent. It's
going to be a tough call, but the person who has that job is going to bleed Montclair. It's going to live Montclair. Okay. It's going to make sure every kid in Montclair is loved, nurtured, and educated at the highest level.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
And I'm willing to take my licks.
Right. Right.
But that person who gets that job, the expectation is going to be that. And we're going to support him to get that done.
I hear you.
Him or her.
Okay. This was a long question, but I brought it down to what I thought the last 3 lines of the question, because a lot of it was historical on buildings and schools being desegregated, which goes years and years. But at the end of the day, you know, the district has brought in programs like Undoing Racism for teachers to work on, for staff. What do you foresee as your role in providing space for educators and the community to continue the conversation about inequity, as how inequity is perpetrated knowingly or unknowingly in our schools?
That's a great question. First, I want to say Montclair should be proud of Montclair for having that conversation. The other cities and municipalities are not having that conversation, who are avoiding that conversation. Mm-hmm. So when I was getting onboarded, being part of those conversations and listening was impressive. Now we can't stop. And one of the things you will hear from me in my superintendent's report and from our district is that we're going to keep that conversation going through restorative justice in our training, through me personally being out there and hopefully in more of these talking about this conversation and talking to people about the conversation, but then doing things. Like, what are we going to do? I had a principal come to me about diversifying her student population in her building. So that's wonderful. I love it. What's your goal? I asked the principal, what's your goal? This is a time to lead. We're going to lead now. What's your goal? What do you want to do? I will help you get there. What do you want to do? Mm-hmm. Because I'm going to hold you accountable to it because it's too important. So I'm excited about it. We're going to have goals. We're going to have to report back to those goals of what we're doing and how we're doing it.
Okay. And, you know, I want to make sure that I get these questions in but so much has happened since we agreed to do this.
Yes, sir.
That we'll tackle those issues, particularly the decision of all of remote learning. But for now, I want to kind of like stay on track here. So you mentioned Mr. Cooper.
Yes.
A lot. And I remember Damon was here. I actually worked with his brother at Westside in Newark when I was doing some consulting for the school there, and his brother was an AD. And very nice guy. I had a good time with him. And I guess this is the, you know, for Mr. Cooper, and he's mentioned it quite a bit. But when you talk about what is your vision in putting in place hiring practices and vetting of candidates that ensure racial literacy and a track record of commitment in that area are in a teacher or an administrator's background and DNA?
That's wonderful. Mr. Cooper was hired because of that, period. We need to bring in certificated teachers, not just anyone, but certificated teachers to work with our students who look like our students. He's been doing that, meeting that goal for me right now. But also supporting them and understanding what we believe in here in Montclair. So I always ask people, you know, can all kids learn and our kids are special? They always say, oh yeah, absolutely. And say, well, how have you done it? What do you believe in? Give me an example. They're going through that right now.
Okay.
And because we're going to get a group of teachers, educators, who are getting hired in this new process that look like us, look like every child in Montclair. But now that they believe what we believe in, they're going to get a chance to learn that through restorative justice, learn that through their teacher training, admin training, but also have to actually actualize it. Because we're watching. We want to support you, but we got to hold you accountable because our kids matter so much.
So, to that, are you somewhat concerned? Because I think what I heard you say subtly, when you say look like us, it's look like the township that is 60% white, 30%, 25, 30% black. But because I don't want the perception to be all Mr. Cooper is going to do is go out and hire black teachers.
Thank you for clarifying that
So
for me.
Yeah, I think that's what I heard.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Thanks for clarifying that for me because yes,
right.
We want our staff to look like our community.
Okay.
So that doesn't mean one or the other, but our community. But we're also making sure where we have those imbalances right now, the imbalances, we're making up for it.
Okay.
Because there is an imbalance out there right now. We're trying to make up for.
Now I'll get to one of the conversations that a concerned parent that they put in there, and it has to deal with steps that have been taken to improve the experience of black students in schools. You know, achievement gap panel, undoing racism training for staff, things like that. But at the heart of the question from these parents was, how will you engage students, parents, and other stakeholders in this process of making students feel more comfortable, particularly black students?
Had a great conversation with several parents who talked to me about the situation. And they asked me, how can I support you? I said, hold me accountable. I said, hold me accountable to getting this information out and getting our best practices done. And said, well, how do we do that? He says, well, I have to meet with you once a month. Once a month, I'm going to meet with you to say, this is what we've done, this is how we're doing it. And that's how I want it to happen.
Okay.
Because if you hold me accountable, I have to come back with you with a product and with results. So I told him, I don't want you in a meeting yelling and screaming, we love Dr. Pons. I don't need that. I need you to hold me accountable. I need you to hold me to results. So that's how I'm going to get it done. Make sure our programs are in place. Programs such as the AP, finding our students and getting them in our AP classes, making sure we raise the bar so kids can pass and do well. Our reading initiative, making sure all our kids can read at or above grade level. Making sure kids with dyslexia are getting the help they need through Orton Gillingham and our partnership with Fairleigh Dickinson University. But holding me to account. Because I want to walk out and say, hey, this is what we've done.
So you mentioned a couple of things there, and this is one of the things I think the school district hasn't done a good job of, and I say that respectfully. You mentioned partnership with Fairleigh Dickinson University. How do you make sure all parents are aware of these programs? I mean, that's the thing, you know, because I may not know that my child has dyslexia. A teacher may not be able to identify, but once it is, like what is your goal, or what is the manner that you feel like you'll make sure parents are aware of all the support systems that are available to their children?
I am so happy you stated that question. We can do a better job of getting information out to people on our websites, tweeting, making sure we get the communication out to our families of what we're doing and how you can actually be involved and how it can help you. Mm-hmm. So you'll see some changes going on our website, on our social media, on our media, how we're getting these information out to families and how we're asking families to be a part of it. Because one thing I want to do also as a superintendent in Montclair is to make sure you hear the whole story of all the things going on out there about us and how much we do care and how much progress we're going to make doing this. So that's one of my initiatives, get the message out to families. Fairleigh Dickinson University partnerships are wonderful. Our staff has come in full hold. They want to be a part of it. They want to learn Orton Gillingham to teach all our kids how to read and read well, particularly kids who may have some difficulties. We had an overwhelming response from our staff members who were out in the summertime during the pandemic. Right. Principals want to join. Wonderful. Parents are excited about it. Wonderful. But now, hold us to account. What are our results? Right. How are we getting this done? You know, that's the big piece for me.
Now, you one of the things you mentioned was getting out the communication. One of the communications you had to get out recently was the fact that you were going to all remote learning. Take us behind the scenes. What was the process? What was the ultimate decision? I think some folks know, but like, and it seems to me that it wasn't something you really wanted to do, but it's something you had to do.
It was hard, and you're right. It was something I had to do, based on safety. We went out and we had a process in place, planning. What are we doing planning? How can we get our PPE equipment, our health and safety equipment done? One part of the planning was also facilities. We started going to buildings, and principals and people were telling us, ventilation could be an issue here. I reached out to our business office, to our architects, to our engineers, and it was an issue. So I said, how can we resolve this? And they said we can resolve it in a couple of ways, a short-term way and a long-term way. We'll roll that out in writing to our families so they can read about it. And it was hard because I knew I had emails from families talking about child care. I have to work. I have to go out and work. I have to do these things. I'm worried about socialization, education. My child regressed. I got all those emails. I was on those Zoom calls, so I knew it. And personally, I have family members in Alabama, cousins close to me who were going through that same situation. So I knew it was hard. That week I couldn't sleep. I had a hard time talking to my wife about anything because I knew that it was going to end up like this.
Okay.
And then when I got the final report from our engineering firm, I said I got to get out quickly to our families and to let them know.
Now, do you feel? I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot, but when I listen to you, I got two hats I got to wear now: a counselor hat, and then I just have a parent hat. And so, do you think there is basically, how long is it going to take before you think the ventilation system in the schools will be where you can safely have children go back in your hybrid model, not fully, but in even hybrid model?
That's a great question and a fair question. Our engineering firm has equipment that can go in our classrooms that can get us in the circulation we need for ventilation and can actually pull out viruses and particles in the air. Okay. In my upcoming update, I'm going to actually be detailed about how it's going to work in the timetable. Okay. Right now, this weekend we were looking on how to find them and where to find them.
Right.
And so today I'd like to report that our business administrator has everything in order. I want to share it with the board first and then take it to the public.
Yeah, that's, it's funny because what I can respect and also understand is there's no way you could budget for this 3 months ago.
Yeah. So
how has this, or do you think this is going to impact what you can and cannot offer based on the fact that, I'm assuming there's going to be significant cost to getting this done, and when you pay for something that you didn't expect, that something has to be, you got to cut somewhere.
That's a great question. So it's going to cost. It's going to cost us. But this is going to cost us a very small amount when it compares to health and safety.
Right.
So you weigh those things.
Okay.
What's the most important thing you do? Is everyone healthy and everyone safe? How can we educate everyone to the best of their capacity?
You can't put no price on health and safety. I agree with you there.
So Emilio has done a wonderful job helping me figure out how we're going to get it done.
Okay.
With that stated, there are bigger projects we can get done also in our community to get us up to date. And we're looking at those also. Okay. But I have to give our engineering firm, EI, the tip of the hat. I asked for a short-term solution and a long-term solution, and they gave us both.
Good. And
so, but we pushed them. We said we want a short-term solution because we can't have people out there forever.
Okay. Now, you walked into this job, and things have changed. And, well, you walked into a job. There's another question: why did you even apply for the job? But now that you've been here a couple of weeks, and this is another parent question, what do you see as the particular successes of the school system here?
The energy, first and foremost. This is a statement my father-in-law would say to me all the time. A person who believes they can or believes they can't, they're both right. Mm-hmm. Montclair believes they can. And that's right. We can do it. The energy here is incredible. The amount of calls I've had, Zoom calls with people wanting to get involved, groups wanting to get involved and support the schools. MFEE had a great conversation this morning. NAACP, great conversation this morning, or before, around education. We can get things done in Montclair. The energy level attracts me. Because with energy you have people who care. You have a central message. All kids can learn, all kids are special. What are we doing to make sure that happens day in and day out in Montclair? Okay. And how can we get our groups focusing on making sure all our kids can learn and all our kids are special? And that's for collaboration. I love to talk about the anti-racism policy that had its first read last night. And it was collaborative effort. Our board members said to us, this is our policy. And I asked, and they also agreed, let's collaborate. Let's get it out to our stakeholders. Have them work on it with us. Okay. We got it back last night. We put in the language, particularly our kids who had their march. Their leader was heavily involved in getting the language into our new anti-racism policy. We voted on it last night for our first read. It's going to go out for our second read. We're also putting it back out there. Take a look at it. Talk to us about it. That's a big statement. For any community to make that statement and make it public is huge.
And make it policy. I mean, once you put it in policy,
you have to live by it.
Right.
You have to live by it.
That's a good checkpoint, I guess, that, Now, so to that, one of the things that I think was, as I sit back again, I look at one of the things I think was a major issue in Montclair, especially the school system, has been a lack of stability at the top. Mm. And I was very pleased that you were given a 5-year contract, because I think that kind of gives you the time to, because everything that you're talking about is not going to happen overnight.
It's going to take a while.
And so when I ask you that question, it goes something you said earlier, if I were to say not so much your philosophy of management, but how are you going to be able to manage, all these things? And to you, Dr. Jonathan Pons, what is your timetable of seeing improvement? I know you said, you got things where you talk to parents, you'll have those checkpoints, but, a year from now, and COVID aside, what do you think Jonathan Pons would be in a position of saying, we did it, and I'm happy about that?
A year from now, if we don't have results and progress, we didn't do anything. We have to start seeing results. Now, big results come in 3 to 5 years. Those are the big results. Mm-hmm. But you can see little landmarks. You can hit those landmarks in within a year. So everything we do, we have to assess. I ask those tough questions to our leaders all the time. Okay, how are we going to do it? Be explicit. How are you going to check that? And then when they come in, it's like, how are we doing with this? Give me some results. Because those are the checks. And even when it came to talk about our hiring practices this summer, I asked Mr. Cooper, give me the numbers. Great. Present the numbers in public. Great. Because we don't do that. We don't have those small checkpoints. Right. You forget about the whole thing.
How important is it that you keep putting things out in public? Because the one thing you said that you told the parent group was hold you accountable. And I don't want to answer the question for you, but I'm assuming that's the way that you're going to keep people to keep you accountable?
That's it. Okay. When it's out in public, you own it. Okay. And it keeps you accountable. And it keeps you accountable to the public and also to your constituents and to your board. And so you own it. So the superintendent's report is going to be where I'm going to be out there in public. And we're going to give numbers and give facts, because that's how it works. Having those meetings, making sure people hear me and hear what I'm saying. And then, as I talked to Dr. Morgan today, I said, Doc, when we start showing results, they trust us more. They trust us more, we can do more. We can do more to help families and kids. We got to show results.
That's good. So, from your viewpoint, obviously someone with a lot of educational experience, but also new to Montclair, what makes you feel hopeful? I mean, I know you said earlier the energy, but outside of energy, what makes you feel we can do this?
First and foremost, we can do this. I talk to Mr. Rose all the time. We said, we got this, we got this. And a couple reasons why, because with everything going on with COVID, everything going on, we have the frameworks in Montclair to get it done. I'm not sure the other superintendents out there before, but when you look at central office and you look at what we can actually do, the support we get from our communities, they're saying yes. The fact that we got Fairleigh Dickinson University up and running within 3 or 4 weeks was amazing.
How did that, what was the impetus of that? How did that come about?
I got a phone call from our director of student support services. He goes, I really want to do something with dyslexia. I go, okay. He said, what do you know about Orton Gillingham? I said, I know a little bit about Orton Gillingham. He goes, is it a good program? I think it's a great program. I said, I've done it before with other places. He goes, well, I'm thinking about doing it at Fairleigh Dickinson University. I said, don't think about it.
Do.
Do.
So that's interesting because I don't know the gentleman's name, but there's one parent who's been very consistent about the district's lack of work in dyslexia. So I hope he's happy because anytime he's talked, he's presented very well. And, you know, that's one of those things where a child just, it's hard to find, you know, and that's where, you know, a parent may not have the skills to find that out. So I'm glad to hear that, and that's incredible.
So one of the things, I love a book called The Knowing Doing Gap. And the Knowing Doing Gap says, if you know what's best to do it. Many times we know what's best to do, but we don't do it. So my response is, if you know what's right to do, argue with me, tell me you know what to do, then now do it. But I'm going to hold you accountable to it.
So I have another question for you from a parent that I completely don't believe in, but I have to ask it because it's true, or it's something that's went up, and that's busing in the South End. I can tell you anybody from my generation, we had to walk to school. And we walked to school and made a lot of fun and gave us some, you know, time management. But now, you know, there's been a push for busing in the South End. And I'm not asking for a commitment, but I do want to know, as of now, do you have an update on where that stands?
The update is that we're working on it. And how can I say that we're working on it? The mayor and I briefly discussed it. The board president, every time I have our phone calls, we have them twice a week, just brought it up to me. Okay. I got an email today about it. So we're working on it. We're going to have a solution to this problem. The one thing I do see, and I hope it comes from this, that we can prove that we care about everyone. And everyone matters to us.
Yeah, and you know, I'll say this, and it may seem somewhat controversial, but growing up, there was no push for busing, particularly in the South End and Fourth Ward. Now the demographics of the area have changed quite a bit, and there's this groundswell of support for busing. But I just think it's one of those things where it made you tougher. I mean, you know, you walk to school. My dad was a laborer, so he'd go to the labor union, and if he got an assignment, he was gone. Sometimes he didn't. I'd be walking up Elm Street. He'd be coming back to the house. He'd beep the horn and keep going. I keep walking to school. So, you know, and also there's some camaraderie, but I have to then, times have changed, right? And you change with the times, and I think if the students, and I say this, if the students truly want the busing, then that's something I see as something that I can think working out. And to that point, there's another thing I'd like to ask you about, and that's and this is something that was going up. People have been talking about it for a while, and that's the start of school.
Yes.
That elementary school kids go to school early, middle school and high school kids go to school later. Do you believe in that? I mean, as an educator, do you put validity in that? And that's not something that was presented, but when we thought of busing.
There are some research behind it around the start of school and when the students are their best. So, you know, the philosophy out there is earlier education, early for younger kids, and they can get their stuff done. But a lot of it's been now changing to sleep. Kids need sleep. So I go back and forth. I do believe in the traditional model where kids get to school. High school kids, they have other activities in the evening time or in the afternoon. They have to come a little bit earlier. So I believe in that. I had a debate with my assistant superintendent though about it. We go back and forth, back and forth. We debated yesterday about a topic. Okay. But my philosophy is the traditional model. But I also believe, because high school kids really do have things like they're in sports and they're in activities, and many times kids who have responsibilities with their siblings can't get involved in those activities if you don't set it up that way. Okay. So I had the luxury in high school of being able to get involved in activities, although you may have some other responsibilities.
So now, the crust, I mean, the history and the foundation of our district is the magnet school system. And I believe in it. I believe in it mostly because of the social skills that you learn. Not being in the same cohort all the time, meeting different kids, going to different schools and things. As you look at it, is the magnet school system, you feel, the best system for Montclair?
So I did a lot of research about Montclair before I decided to even interview, in the interview and then to come on. The Montclair system of magnets is going to be here. They're here before me. They're going to be here after me. I say it all the time to people, because when I think about what I want my kids to be involved in, I see the drumming that's going on in one of the schools. I see the dance going on in one of the schools. I see the. I was blessed enough to be able to get involved with my district to bring in a greenhouse. My last district, the greenhouses. Those activities and those things are different, and they make kids aware of their whole, who they are as a whole. And I believe in math, ELA, social studies and science. I believe in that heart. I believe in it. But if you don't know how it applies to life, then all you have is this. You don't see the abstract, and you're lost in it. So I think about my son Jaden. Loves to dance, loves music. I was doing a roly with him the other day, and I know he would love being a part of something like this.
Now, so something that's really important right now, and this is a question from a parent. How are we going to monitor the most disadvantaged families so they can be provided the best education opportunity and remote learning, and particularly those children with IEPs and the special education population?
Great question. Got to hold myself to account. How are we going to do that? Announce programs out there we're doing, such as Orton Gillingham, our guiding coalition around reading. How are we going to get our IEP students with the least restrictive environment, such as inclusion? How are we going to do that? Announce our programming, how we're going to do it, and then every time I'm in the public, talk about our results. Where are we? This is what we're doing. So if you're a person who's working 2 or 3 jobs, you can't come to a meeting, you'll hear me say it over and over again. And then you'll see me in schools. You'll see me around the town. And that's how I'm going to do it. And it's called, when I like to lead by being present and being around and being consistent. Immanuel Kant, a philosopher I read a long time ago, talks about being consistent as being ethical.
So what are you going to do for me as a parent? I got to go to work, and I have a 12-year-old. I can't leave him at home. I mean, I know we've had some conversation about things. I guess just for people to know that, that at least you're thinking about utilizing some places, and I know you said you and MFEE have talked, but if you were to have to take this opportunity to let folks know there's a plan in place, but what do you feel are the barriers that you'll need help with?
I'm going to need barriers around regulations, how to work around regulations to make sure we can get kids what they need in the child care they need. Working with groups, YMCA, being creative around, hey, can we help a family afford this? What can we do as a district to help you? Using that position as a superintendent, getting into rooms. When you're a superintendent, you're asked to come into a room and talk about child care. People let you in. Maybe not so much as a principal, as a superintendent, they let you in the room.
Right.
And so how do I use that position to work? Putting partners together around this topic and really pushing it and saying to the families, I hear you, I got your back. I'm going to advocate and pull my position and my power, however you can do, to get you what you need.
Okay. Now, getting near the end, so it's not the hot seat. This has been fun. That one position you mentioned earlier, the principal at the high school, what are you looking for in that person?
I want someone who's a Mountie, who bleeds Montclair. Talk about the situation, superintendent. It was so much changeover. You couldn't get your bearings straight. I want someone who bleeds Montclair, who's going to be there for a while, a long while, who's going to work on moving the culture in the right direction, taking what we do well and highlighting what we're struggling with, changing. But be there so the people there working for him realize that individual is there for the commitment in the long haul. Only way to get it done. So that's the first thing. Are you going to commit to Montclair and be in Montclair? Second thing, are you going to be an instructional leader and a leader of high character? Or are you going to be someone who's going to be in the classroom supporting teachers to get things done, having those conversations around how we're going to get it done, working with the union president, making sure we're getting those things done? Are you going to be that leader? I don't want someone to sit in their desk. I remember Sidney Smith, my first superintendent, I love him to death. He was tough on me when I was a principal. Had a nice new chair, was given to me, put it in my office. Principal Pons, Dr. Pons, was beautiful. Looked at me, he goes, it's a beautiful chair. You're never going to be in it. And I want someone who's going to be around, be present, and work hard. Someone who people can look at and say, that's my principal at the Montclair High School. He or she's awesome. Okay. They stand for what we believe in. I want that person to outshine me. I want that person to be seen as a stalwart in this community. In places that have had principals like that, I can think of Dana Brown in Malden, Massachusetts, Pete Clark down in Middlesex County, a person, Jason Lester, who I love personally, who we've had a chance to work with down in Middlesex County. When those principals are there, they become that legend. Okay. And I want a legend. So it's going to be hard. We're going to put people through a lot of questions, but I want a legend, someone that says, person has high character, they love my kids, they love my school, they love my town, they stand up for it. Okay. And so I want that individual. And that's for me is a legacy. When I'm 50 plus and I can retire, or 62 and I can retire, and I'm going to retire, I can go back and say, man, that high school principal of Montclair is special.
Superintendents don't retire. They go on and become interims.
They say that. They say that, but I'm not sure. I teach at Rowan, and I've been teaching school improvement there for a while. I love it. I absolutely love it, and I love working with leaders and potential leaders. Had a chance to teach diversity and leadership there, leadership classes there, structural leadership classes there. Love it. Okay. So I love teaching. Okay. So I think I'm going to go back to it around leadership, but my wife may have different ideas for me. Okay. She always does, and so.
Well, Dr. Pons, I want to thank you. That is an elbow, and I look forward to further conversations with you, and I think the Montclair Public School District is in good hands. I hope that everyone out there does. Couldn't get every question in, but I'm sure over time they'll pop into your inbox now, but at the end of the day, it's great to have you here, and I wish you a lot of luck.
Thank you so much for everything you've done for me so far, and hold me to account. Okay. Hold me to account. All right. And I'm excited about Montclair.
We'll do that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.